I walked into the family reunion, smiling, pretending everything was fine. I had no idea what was coming. The dining hall was loud with laughter, plates clinking, and relatives catching up after months of not seeing each other. I greeted a few people, grabbed a drink and sat down, thinking it would be just another typical family gathering. But my sister had other plans. Halfway through dinner, when everyone was settled, she suddenly stood up. The sound of her fork tapping against her glass silenced the room. I glanced up, confused. What was she doing? Then, with the biggest smirk on her face, she said, "Everyone, I have something to share." Her voice was dripping with fake concern, but I could see the excitement in her eyes. She was enjoying this. I had no idea what was coming next, but my stomach twisted. And then she said it. Guess what? My poor sister is bankrupt. For a moment, I thought I misheard her, but the gasps around the room, the shocked expressions, and the muffled laughter told me I hadn't. Heat rushed to my face. My heart pounded. My own sister had just announced something so personal, so private in front of everyone, and she was smiling while doing it. Some people exchanged awkward glances, unsure of how to react. Others whispered behind their hands. And then, of course, there were the ones who found it funny, laughing, shaking their heads, and muttering things like, "Wow, really? That's embarrassing." I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. My sister stood there, waiting, enjoying my reaction. She had planned this. She wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone, and I could see it in her eyes. She thought she had won. I gripped my fork tightly, forcing myself to breathe. I wanted to say something to defend myself, but I knew anything I said now would just make me look desperate. So I did the only thing I could. I swallowed my pride and kept my face neutral. She had no idea what I had done this morning. No idea that her little victory wouldn't last long. Because in just a few minutes, I was about to change everything. She stood there, soaking in the attention like she was the star of the show, the gasps, the whispers, the curious stares. She loved every second of it. And me? I was just her entertainment for the night. With a dramatic sigh, she placed a hand on her chest, shaking her head like she actually felt bad for me. "It's so sad," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. But the way her lips curled, the way her eyes sparkled with amusement, I knew the truth. She wasn't sad, she was thrilled. She wanted everyone to see me as a failure. She wanted them to believe that she was the successful one, the smart one, the one who had it all together. And I was just the reckless sister who had made bad decisions. "But some of us just make smarter choices," she added with a smug smile, as if she was giving the family some grand life lesson. Her words stung, not because they were true, but because she wanted them to be. I watched as relatives nodded, some whispering in agreement. A few even looked at me with pity, as if I was a child who had lost her way. My own sister had turned my life into a joke, and they were eating it up. She glanced at me, waiting for a reaction, waiting for me to break. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction, because while she was busy celebrating my downfall, she had no idea that I had already won. I sat there listening to my sister go on and on about how she had made smart choices while I had supposedly ruined my life. She was basking in her moment, convinced she had me cornered. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my finances were perfectly fine. I wasn't bankrupt. Not even close. In fact, while she had been busy picking out the perfect moment to embarrass me, I had been making the biggest purchase of my life. That very morning, I had bought something she had been dreaming about for years. But I kept quiet, letting her think she had the upper hand. I could have shut her down right then and there. I could have stood up, laughed in her face, and told everyone the truth. But that would have been too easy. No, I wanted her to enjoy her little victory, for now. Because the longer she believed she had won, the sweeter my revenge would be. So I played my part. I let her gloat. I let her enjoy the whispers, the pitiful glances thrown my way. I even forced a small, embarrassed smile just to sell it. She thought she had destroyed me in front of everyone. and that made it even better. I stole a glance at my phone where the email from my real estate agent sat, confirming the purchase. I nearly laughed. If only she knew. If only she realized that while she was standing there acting like the queen of the night, she was about to be knocked off her throne. She had no idea that in just a few moments I would flip everything upside down. And when I did, she would never forget it. For as long as I could remember, my sister had been obsessed with one thing: the lake house. It wasn't just any house. It was her dream house. A massive, breathtaking vacation home right by the water with floor-to-ceiling windows and a private dock. She talked about it constantly, as if she already owned it. She would show pictures at family gatherings, going on and on about how perfect it was. "I can already see myself waking up to that view every morning," she would say, sighing dramatically. "It's only a matter of time before it's mine." She wasn't wrong. She had been saving for years. She cut back on vacations, skipped expensive nights out, and worked extra hours just to make this dream happen. Every time she talked about it, she made sure to remind everyone how much effort she had put in. And last week, she made a big announcement. "I'm finally doing it," she had said, beaming with excitement. "Next week, I'm making an offer. That house is going to be mine." The whole family cheered her on, praising her for being so focused and determined. She acted like it was already a done deal, like no one else in the world could possibly want that house as much as she did. But she had no idea. She had no clue that while she was standing there feeling on top of the world, that house wasn't hers anymore. Because that very morning I had bought it. Signed, sealed, mine. She thought she had everything figured out, that nothing could ruin her perfect little plan. But what she didn't realize was that life had just pulled the rug from under her feet, and she was about to find out in the most unforgettable way possible. What she didn't know, I had already bought that house, that very morning. While she was probably busy picking out furniture in her head, imagining herself lounging on the deck with a glass of wine, I was signing the final papers. The house was officially mine. I could still remember the excitement bubbling inside me as I held the pen, signing my name on the dotted line. The real estate agent shook my hand and said, "Congratulations. It's all yours now." And in that moment, I knew. This was the best decision I had ever made. It wasn't just about the house. Sure, it was stunning and anyone would be lucky to own it, but for me it was about something else. It was about her. The way she had always treated me like I was beneath her, like I would never amount to anything. She had spent years acting like she was the superior one, rubbing her successes in my face. And tonight, she had taken it too far. But the beauty of it all? She had no idea. She stood there at the dinner table, completely unaware that the dream she had been chasing for years had already slipped through her fingers. While she was basking in the attention, gloating about my so-called bankruptcy, I was sitting there calm, waiting for the perfect moment to drop the bombshell. I didn't need to rush. No, that would have been too easy. The longer she stayed up on her little pedestal, the harder she would fall. And I wanted her to fall hard. So I smiled, nodded along as she kept talking, pretending to be embarrassed, pretending that her words had affected me. Because in just a few minutes, she was about to lose everything, and she didn't even see it coming. Just as the laughter started to fade, I knew it was time. I had let her have her moment, let her feel like she was on top. But now, it was my turn. I pushed my chair back and stood up, keeping my expression calm, almost amused. Every eye in the room turned to me, waiting, probably expecting some pathetic defense or an awkward excuse. But I had something much better. I smiled sweetly at my sister, who was still looking smug, still convinced she had won. "Speaking of smart choices," I said casually, pulling my phone from my pocket, "I made one this morning." Her grin faltered for a second. "Oh," she said, trying to sound uninterested, but I could see the slight wrinkle in her forehead. I tapped on my phone, scrolling for a moment before glancing back up at her. "You might want to check the property listings," I said, my voice light and teasing. "That dream vacation home of yours? It's off the market. The The room fell into silence. My sister's face twitched as confusion set in. I watched as she quickly pulled out her phone, fingers shaking slightly as she tapped furiously, searching. I didn't even need to look at her screen. I already knew what she would find. And then it hit her. Her eyes widened, her face drained of color, and for the first time that night, she was completely, utterly speechless. She stared at the screen as if she had just seen a ghost. "No," she whispered. Then louder, "No. That's not possible." "Oh, but it is," I said, tilting my head. "Signed the papers this morning. It's mine now." Gasps filled the room. All those who had laughed at me earlier were now watching, stunned. My sister looked like she was going to explode. And in that moment, I had never felt more satisfied in my life. Her face twisted first in confusion, then in pure horror. It was like watching a slow-motion disaster unfold. She yanked out her phone so fast she nearly dropped it, her fingers flying across the screen as she searched for the listing. The moment her eyes landed on the words "sold" next to her dream house, her entire body stiffened. Then it happened. "No, no, this can't be!" Her scream echoed through the hall, cutting through the chatter. Conversations stopped, forks clattered onto plates, and every single person turned to stare. Some with curiosity, others with shock. But me? I just watched. She shot up from her seat, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "This has to be a mistake," she shrieked, shaking her head as if she could will the truth away. But there was no mistake, and she knew it. Her breathing turned ragged, her eyes darting back and forth between me and her screen, as if looking at me long enough would make this nightmare disappear. "You," she gasped, pointing at me with pure rage. "You did this." I crossed my arms, tilting my head slightly. "Well, you did say something about making smarter choices." Her face burned red, a mixture of embarrassment, fury, and disbelief all at once. She had spent years picturing that house as hers, saving for it, dreaming about it, and now, in the blink of an eye, it was gone, mine. "Why?" she croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shrugged, my lips curling into a slow smile. "Because I could." The room erupted. Some gasped, some whispered, and a few even looked amused. My sister? She looked like she was about to combust. And standing there watching her world crumble, I felt nothing but pure, undeniable satisfaction. Silence. Thick, heavy, beautiful silence. The entire room had gone still, eyes bouncing between my sister and me. They had watched her humiliate me just moments ago, laughing at my so-called failure. Now they were watching her break apart as her perfect little world collapsed. She turned to me, her chest rising and falling like she had just run a marathon. Her hands trembled, her lips parted in disbelief. "You bought my house?" Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for my drink, taking the slowest, most satisfying sip of my life. I let the moment hang, stretching the tension in the air just a little longer. Then, I set my glass down and met her wild, desperate gaze. "I bought my house!" The final blow. Her face twisted, eyes darting as if searching for a way out of this nightmare. But there wasn't one. It was done. The papers were signed, the deal was closed, and that house, the one she had poured her hopes into, was mine. A choked sound escaped her throat. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like she wanted to say something, anything, but the words just wouldn't come. The people around us shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to console her or stay quiet. A few had the decency to look ashamed, probably remembering how they had laughed at me earlier. I leaned forward slightly, dropping my voice just low enough for only her to hear. "Next time," I murmured, "be careful who you try to humiliate." Her face crumpled. I straightened up, smoothed my dress, and reached for my drink again. The night had started with her putting on a show at my expense, but now, I was the one enjoying the view. And victory had never tasted sweeter. She stood there, shaking, her eyes burning with pure humiliation. For years, she had strutted around like she was untouchable, like she was smarter, better, above me. And tonight, she had crashed and burned in front of everyone, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She opened her mouth like she wanted to scream, but no words came out. Her pride wouldn't let her stay, not after this. With a frustrated growl, she snatched her purse and stormed out. The sound of her heels clicking against the floor was the only noise in the room. No one moved. No one spoke. They just watched her go, stunned by what had just unfolded before them. And me? I simply sat back, picked up my fork, and took another bite of my meal. Because unlike her, I could still eat tonight. A few people shifted awkwardly in their seats, some glancing at me with a mix of curiosity and, dare I say, a little respect. The same ones who had laughed at me earlier now looked embarrassed. I didn't care. I wasn't here to prove anything to them. This wasn't about the family, their opinions, or their whispers. This was about her. About showing her that I wasn't someone she could walk all over, that she didn't hold all the power, that I could win too. And I had. I lifted my glass, taking another slow sip, letting the satisfaction settle deep in my bones. Because this victory, it was mine. She had planned to humiliate me tonight, to make me feel small, to laugh at my pain in front of everyone. But instead, she was the one who left with nothing. And as I sat there finishing my meal in peace, I realized one thing: revenge had never tasted so sweet.